Hey gorgeous people, happy Monday morning, July 7th. Welcome to the era of Uranus in Gemini. Let me be the first to warmly welcome you right here on my channel. Now you may notice I am in a slightly different surrounding than I usually am. I am in New York because my baby sister got engaged this week, so send some love out to her wherever you are in the universe and grab your soda water, literal fucking sunshine flavored soda water, and strap in because Uranus is moving into Gemini. Now we're going to talk about that and so much more, but this is going to be a somewhat more casual show than my show has been historically. And that's just because I didn't feel like lugging my entire recording setup to New York. Now, if that changes your idea about who I am as a content creator, then I guess it's good for you to know that up front, but I'm really prioritizing spending some time with my family, spending some time in the sun. I love coming to New York in the summer because I love going to museums, okay? I love seeing art. I love walking on the water. It's just a place that has my heart. I lived in New York for about 5 years. I miss who I am here every day. Now, I'm gonna do something a little bit different this week. Instead of reading through some of the comments from my past videos, I wanted to talk directly to you guys about some of the feedback I've been getting about particularly this Cancer, Jupiter, new moon situation. I've had so many people reaching out to me telling me that they feel surprised and they feel sort of alarmed at the fact that Jupiter in Cancer is not unabashedly positive for them. It seems like a lot of people have been listening to astrology content, horoscopes, or maybe even seen astrologers in one-on-one consultations and come away with the understanding that Jupiter in Cancer is gonna be like lucky, beautiful, shining, only good vibes. Now, for some people, that's definitely true. For example, if you have a day chart or if you have Jupiter really well positioned in your natal chart, you might be feeling that right now. And if you are, good for you. But for some people, now if you have Jupiter in like Virgo, or maybe you have Jupiter in Capricorn in your natal chart, or maybe you have Jupiter in Gemini in your natal chart, maybe you have a night chart Jupiter, that can do it too. I have another video about this on my channel. You can check it out. And I talk at length about the ways to evaluate Jupiter in your natal chart and what goes into that. But this is a perfect opportunity for you to stop and reflect. And I'm gonna give you a couple examples. Now, I have a friend who is in a really difficult spot in her relationship. She's a Capricorn rising. So she spent all year getting these messages from horoscopes and other astrologers telling her, you're gonna have great luck in your relationships this year. Your relationship is gonna be soaring. It's gonna be awesome. She has a really well-positioned natal Jupiter in Leo and a strong sun ruling that Jupiter. She has a night chart and she natally, very importantly, has Mars in Cancer in her 7th house. So this Jupiter moment, while all of the horoscopes and all of the information is saying that by all accounts it should be good luck in relationships, it's actually resulted in the complete and utter irrevocable detonation of her relationship, the dissolution of her relationship, and a divorce. Now, this just really highlights the difficulty that any and all astrologers should have and should actively be grappling with when they're making horoscope type content. And it's part of why I really don't enjoy making horoscope type content. It almost feels unethical because you really don't know anything about what's going on in somebody's natal chart. When we're speaking generally as astrologers, we are speaking almost in a vacuum. And it's only true in that way. We have no other information about your chart, so we can't say for sure whether you have a really constructive and positive relationship with Jupiter or not. But this moment is a really rich one for you as individuals to reflect on what's going on in your life and to develop your own understanding of your relationship with Jupiter. Now, I shared this quite succinctly in like a meme format on my Instagram page a couple weeks ago. This image that highlights the difference between the feeling that everything that enters my life is a gift, which would be kind of like Jupiter in a day chart or in a really auspicious place in the birth chart, or everything that exits my life is a gift, which is kind of like Jupiter in an inauspicious or an imperiled place, or maybe in a night chart. And this is really the core tension. We can sit here and we can tell you that Jupiter in Cancer is going to be sweet and awesome and cups overflowing, which we talked about last week. But like I mentioned last week, for some people, the cup overflowing is like Dumbledore drinking that Horcrux juice. And for some people, it really is like emotional abundance, or maybe like really feeling lucky and magnetized and a connection with divinity. I want to share with you a story from a friend of mine who I've known since we were like 5 years old. And my friend, unfortunately, a few years back got got a DUI. And when she got this DUI, it was by far the worst thing that had ever happened in her life. And not just because it was a bad thing that happened to her, but because it was a way that the world was challenging her inner conception of her ideals versus her externalized conception of her ideals, right? Like, she never wanted to believe that she was the kind of person who would make that choice. And yet here she was confronted with this evidence that she actually was. And of course, a DUI is not just, a thing that happens to you. It is a very expensive and long-lasting court case that often involves like community service hours or working with 12-step programs, the whole kit and caboodle. Now, that happened to her maybe a decade ago, but recently we were talking about this again, and without even thinking about it, in the stream of consciousness talking, she said, "Thank God I got that DUI because," and then carried on with the sentence. And my mouth was sort of dropped open because I was like, did you hear what you just said? Like, this thing that was the worst thing that ever happened to you, time passed, and you have since realized that this was such a huge gift for you, and that it really changed the way that you think about the world and you think about your role in it and your own values and your own sense of responsibilities in the world. So one of my friends going through total annihilation of her love life, another friend reflecting on the ways that some of the difficult experiences she's had have really shaped who she is as a person and become keystone values in her life. I think both of these stories kind of get at what's going on with Jupiter when it's not just straightforward luck and abundance. Now, I had plenty of comments on my videos telling me that people are getting random checks in the mail. Good for you. That's definitely Jupiter at work, random job opportunities. But if you're going through something right now and you're like, okay, I'm sorry, why is my life this difficult? Because every astrologer told me it was going to be incredible. That's why. This is a really important time for you to discover something that you will remember forever about your natal relationship to whatever planets you have in Cancer, to whatever planets you have in the cardinal signs. That's Libra, Capricorn, Aries, and Cancer, and or to your natal relationship to Jupiter and what's going on there. So reflect on those things. Let me know in the comments below. How are things going for you? Is it tough in a way you didn't expect? Is it tough in a way maybe you did expect? Or is everything all roses and sunshine like all the astrologers have said that it was going to be? All right, let's get into the transits of this week. This is a huge freaking week because Uranus is moving into Gemini. Now, Venus at the end of last week moved into Gemini first, conjoining Uranus, moving in. Now Uranus comes in and they both are kind of going to start trining Pluto in Aquarius, which is really a generational, supportive, collaborative, synergistic moment. Obviously, Uranus is going to be in Gemini for quite some time, and we have a while to get used to it because it will retrograde back into Taurus one last time. Now, this is one of the transits that I have been most excited about for many reasons. Uranus in any place is bringing revolution, it's bringing surprise, it's bringing democratization, and it's bringing an openness around power that can feel quite rebellious. Now, I can't think of a sign that might enjoy such sudden and surprising events less than a fixed earth sign like Taurus. Obviously, if you have any planets in Taurus or any of the fixed signs, that is Taurus, Leo, Scorpio, or Aquarius, you've probably been feeling this a lot more strongly than most people. I actually hadn't even thought about Uranus in quite some time. It's interesting because I have Uranus in my first house, so you'd think that I would be really familiar with and really intimately acquainted with its significations and the ways that it plays out in my life. But it wasn't until reflecting on the last 8 years that Uranus has spent in Taurus, but it wasn't until reflecting upon this epoch of time with Uranus and Taurus that I realized it was squaring not only my chart ruler in Aquarius, but also my entire stellium in Leo, and also opposing my MC Pluto conjunction. So I have been living in a fixed grand cross for 8 years, and let me tell you, when I put that together, it explained a fucking lot. Now, this isn't something that I necessarily would have put together this way, but I was talking with my really talented friend and astrologer, Whitney Kranz. Maybe you've heard of her. She was reflecting back to me some of what I was saying, which was that I felt like going to art school in 2017, and I felt like getting involved in a serious relationship that took me out of New York. After that, making some of the other choices that I've made going into the corporate world, moving around, they have really, really stifled me and made my life feel impossibly dull. It really changed my creativity almost for the worse. Like, going to art school made creativity something that I loved doing and being and expressing authentically every day day into something that was quantified and chopped up and dismembered and thrust back at me into a very specific box. And the same thing happened when I worked in the music industry. I've always loved music and I always wanted to write for Rolling Stone. And when I moved to New York and I started working in the music industry and I started going to shows and meeting with people and talking with people and writing these articles, it was like quantifying and classifying my work in a way that was so fucking unfun that it ruined my taste in music for a while. Now, when I was talking to Whitney, she said, "Oh, surprise, surprise. You're feeling your love of art and your creativity return to you. You're feeling your love of music return to you." I've been falling asleep listening to music for the first time in years, but it's something that has so defined my life for every single year before this time with Uranus and Taurus. So hearing her reflect that back to me actually unlocked something really powerful. So I want to encourage you guys, as you're thinking about where Uranus is going and what it's doing, think about where it's been. And if you don't have a friend you can bounce things off, get into the Uranus and Gemini mood and talk to my old friend ChatGPT. Ask it to interview you about the last 8 years. Tell it what house Taurus is in your chart. It's not very good at astrology, I'll be honest, but if you can guide it and set it up. For example, you can say, Taurus is my 10th house in astrology, and I've been going through this transit for 8 years. Can you interview me and ask me some questions about the ways that my relationship to visibility, my career, my life path, and my reputation have moved, changed, morphed, and Uranusified over the last number of years? All right, that's enough of the past. Let's talk a little bit about the future. I am so excited about Uranus into Gemini, and I know that a lot of mundane astrologers particularly are speaking in quite sensational ways about this transit. That is something that you should totally go check out. There are some very talented astrologers who have intense, a little bit terrifying, and honestly really well-founded in historical research things to say about this transit. That is not what I do here on this channel. So if that is something you're looking for, I would go recommend the work of Nick Dagan-Best, Patrick Watson, Catherine Urban. Chris Brennan has so much on his show from all of those people and more. But what we're going to talk about here is the ways that we think about thinking. I am so excited for how Uranus in Gemini is going to change the thoughts we think about the things we think. Now, I think honestly, some of this we are already seeing in relation to AI, but I think it's going to go even deeper than that, particularly with this trine from Pluto in Aquarius. I've been dabbling a little bit in the work of Annika Harris, and she has this excellent documentary that I'm currently in the middle of, where she is presenting some of the cutting edge research that we have and the scientific information that we have available about consciousness. And part of her thesis that she articulates, again, as the sum total of all of this work that she is aggregating, is that consciousness seems like it may be an innate material, not so much something that a brain produces, but something that it accesses. I don't know about you, but hearing this completely blew my mind and just tickled my little Gemini parts. Now, work like this is among the most exciting thing for me to think about as, of course, a Gemini Sun, Mercury myself, but I can't wait for the ways that our eyes will be opened and that our brains will be instigated. I also can't help but think about the difference and the gulf between our intellectual understanding of reality and our felt sense experience of reality. I suspect that this will be a time when the gulf between those two things will be really, really significant. One of my favorite archetypes for Uranus into Gemini is the sort of like manic tinkerer. Now, I think this goes in many different directions. Like in a fantasy realm, we have the arcanist who is sort of like always at the workbench creating these little magic doodads and inventions. And I think we also have people like Doc from Back to the Future. There are so many versions of this, and that is really the impression that I'm getting from Uranus in Gemini. And that's part of what I mean when I say that I think the gulf between our lived experience and the way that we feel in our bodies and the things that we're thinking in our head, which are maybe on level 3000, there's going to be some friction and some disconnect, maybe even just actually lack of communication between those pieces of us. It's nice to know that Venus is moving with Uranus into Gemini, both now and also next year in April and May 2026, when Uranus comes in for the last time. As I mentioned on last week's show, Venus will conjoin Uranus one more time at 29 Taurus. That happens the same week next April as a Mars-Saturn conjunction. So whatever the last little bits of Venus in Taurus you need to wrap up, make sure that you're still keeping that in your mind. And some of the tension that I talked about between brain and body might ease easily be targeted, we might really ease ourselves into this hot tub, this intellectual hot tub this year while Jupiter is in Cancer, while we know for sure that Uranus is coming back into Taurus one last time. All right, on July 10th, we have the most deliciously boring and bland and standard issue full moon in Capricorn. Now, I hope I'm not cursing myself by saying that, but I will say after a couple years, basically since 2019, of spooky Saturn stuff going on in Capricorn, as a humble Cap rising, I am always excited to see just a standard issue military surplus full moon in Capricorn coming down the pipeline. Now, 2 days after this, on July 12th, Saturn stations retrograde at 1 degree Aries. So I do think that that station is somewhat involved in what's happening in this full moon. And it's important to note that from July 12th through 22nd, Saturn and Neptune are going to come the closest that they come before their conjunction. They will be just 13 minutes apart from one another. That's 0 degrees and 13 minutes, which is certainly within the orb of what we would call a conjunction. So some of, I think, what this full moon is doing for us is giving us a moment before we surface sort of like explosively out into this Saturn-Neptune thing. We have this moment here where Saturn is still direct, but slow stationing, and Neptune is already retrograde. We've got this full moon. Now, last summer, we actually had 2 full moons in Capricorn, one of them at 0, one of them at 29. Then we had Pluto coming back to 29 Capricorn. It's just been spooky, Saturnian, dark, graveyard Earth vibes in Capricorn, honestly, since 2019. So if that's been you and you've been doing a lot of inner work, if you've got stuff in Capricorn or the other cardinal signs, you might want to use this full moon as a nice, calm, even-keeled way to put forth some of your own intentions. Full moons naturally are these moments of culmination and a building of power. It's always a good time to put something in your windowsill and charge it. I think it might even be a really nice time to like actually go outside and get this full moon into your bones. Might be a nice spiritual way to cleanse yourself, and almost like an ancestral emotional, like a very bone deep emotional laundering machine. All right, final transit of the week. As I mentioned, on July 12th, Saturn will station retrograde at 1 degree of Aries. It will be retrograde until November 28th. It heads all the way back to 25 Pisces, which is pretty close to where it formed that 3 conjunction dance with Venus this spring. All right, that is it for our transits of the week. Now we've reached the portion of our show where we talk about how I, as a pagan, animist, astrologer, human being, am going to be using the transits of this week. I am going to throw Uranus and Gemini a full-blown welcome party. I am letting my intellectual ping pong brain, mad tinkerer, freak flag fly here in New York. It's Pride today, so that was a pun. I'm gonna be doing my best to feed myself all kinds of brain shocking, intellectual power democratizing media, and just fully letting myself be as weird inside my brain as I want to be, while trying not to judge myself too much for it. I'm also totally using this full moon in Capricorn to get the moon into my bones, to clean out my bones and like scrub all of this nasty, strange, deep darkies out of my bones from this Saturn-Pluto conjunction that happened atop my ascendant in 2019, to all of the stuff that Pluto really did at the ass end of Capricorn that felt like it was just for me personally. Last year's spooky Saturn girl summer, I'm trying to get rid of all of that, bleach my bones white again, and I'm gonna go spend some time in the moon at night here in New York. If you hear someone howling at the moon, you will know that it's me or some other excited Gemini freak running around the New York streets. All right, beautiful people, you know what that sound means. My sunshine flavored La Croix is empty, and so the show must be over. Happy Monday, happy Uranus into Gemini. Let me know in the comments if you're excited about this transit. I'm gonna have one more of these New York shows recorded for you, and then I'll be back home, hopefully with a glow in my cheeks and a twinkle in my eye. I hope you guys have an incredible week, and I'll see you next Monday.